Jewish mysticism may seem like a contradiction in terms. The mystics seek the direct experience of and union with God. David Ariel, an authority on Jewish mysticism, points out that Rabbinic Judaism is anti-mystical, or at least it attempts to neutralize the mystical impulse inherent in all religions. Of course, we find that there is a certain level of leadership in all religions who are anti-mysticism. This is not unique to Judaism. But this was not always the case in Judaism. The rabbis at the time of the early rabbinic period, 70 AD to 200 AD, were well aware that in times past, men had had direct, intimate contact with God. At the time of Adam, man communicated directly and easily with God. Abraham, Moses, and the prophets also had an intimate relationship with God. But the rabbis noted that God had gradually withdrawn from direct communication with man. Why? The rabbis believed that about the time of the return from the Babylonian exile in the 5th century BC, direct communication between God and man had come to an end. By the 1st century, they believed a great chasm had opened between God and man. At that point, writes Ariel, the Jewish people had no expectations of having a direct, unmediated relationship with God. End of quote. Judaism became a legalistic religion which substituted the observance of the law, ritual, and morality for direct mystical experience. Rabbinic Judaism, which developed into modern Judaism, has been suspicious or even hostile to mysticism ever since. According to Rabbi Devorah Jacobson, quote, the rabbinic tradition was always superstitious and fearful of any mystical movement that arose in Judaism. From very early on, the rabbis went to extremes to put hedges and fences around mystical practice and belief. End of quote. The mystic posed a threat to the system of rabbinic law, and thus to the power and authority of the rabbis who had created the system. During the early rabbinic period, the rabbis recognized that a rare individual could communicate directly with God. They believed in miracles and even recorded a number of cases where people had had prophetic experiences. But they did not want mysticism to play any role in matters of religious law. Writes Ariel, they rejected the legal admissibility of the individual religious experience, direct contact with God. They even rejected prophecy in favor of the indirect relationship with God that is possible through the fulfillment of the Torah. Thus we see that those who have desired to pursue the path of the Kabbalah and Jewish mysticism have been up against the entrenched hierarchy of Judaism, just as light bearers in every one of the world's religions have come up against the same entrenched hierarchy when it comes down to personal communion directly with God without the intercession of priest or rabbi or church or minister, etc. This is where there is the dividing of the way for all of us. The literal translation of the word Torah is teaching, but it refers to Jewish law. In the narrow sense, Torah refers to the written law, the Pentateuch, or 5 books of Moses. In the broader sense, Torah encompasses all the teachings of Judaism, its laws, doctrines, ethics, philosophy, customs, and ceremonies. This includes the oral law, the Talmud, which is the vast body of rabbinic writings on civil and religious law, and other rabbinic teachings. For the Christian, the heart and soul of Judaism is in the prophets and the patriarchs. In the prophets we find the true mystics, and in them and in their path we find a kinship and a similar union with God. The only begotten Son of God is the universal Christ. That Christ is individualized in the Christ figure shown on the chart, the middle figure. It is individualized for you and me and every son and daughter of God. The Rabbi, Jesus of Nazareth, was the incarnation of that Christ, but he never claimed a unique or exclusive sonship. Rather, he taught that every son and daughter of God must become one with the Christ as he had. He came to show the way of the restoration of the soul to the plane of the Son, called Tiferet in the KABBALAH. He told his disciples, "He that will drink from the same fount of the universal Christ from which I have drunk shall be as I am." The mediator is called the Holy Christ Self. The lower figure that you see in the chart consists of the soul, clothed in the garments of the four lower bodies. What we understand in this chart, which we also call the tree of life, even as the chart of the KABBALAH is called the tree of life, is the point of light that is I am that I am, that is the point of the release of light, of Ein Sof. That is the highest manifestation of light. It is written in the Old Testament, "No man can see God and live." Mark Prophet said that meant no man can see God and still live as man. If he survives the experience, he will be God in manifestation. So is the power of the transforming light. So we see this is the presence of absolute God in the I am that I am. We are not ready to stand in that presence, but we are getting ready, right? Yes. We are getting very ready, and as we get ready, that presence draws closer and closer to us until the day and the hour comes when we are called for that union with that God. So this is what the Kabbalists saw. They saw the Sphirot as stepping down the light of the Absolute. So the Absolute God and the human have no contact except through the mediator who is the Son of God, who is Tiferet in the KABBALAH. Jewish mysticism acknowledges Tiferet as the Son of God, and they call him the Son of God. They simply do not call him Jesus Christ. They call him simply the Son of God. So we will continue with our understanding that the I am that I am is stepped down to the level of the Christ, but now we will understand that there are stages and degrees of this stepping down process. And from the level of Tiferet, that Son of God, there is a further stepping down until you and I in this octave can receive that exact portion of light that we are able to live with and comfortably contain within our four lower bodies and our chakras and every organ and cell. As you use the violet flame and invoke that power of God for transmutation, and you clear the debris by right diet, and you purify and purge the four lower bodies, little by little, day by day, you can contain more of that light. So the mediator of the Christ is the regulator, constantly regulating. So if you get into an angry mood or a discordant mood, your Holy Christ Self is up there turning the keys and fooling with the switches to make sure that you don't get any more energy that you can misqualify. Because your Holy Christ Self is doing you a favor. The more energy you have and the more energy you misqualify, the more karma you make. So the Holy Christ Self is the mediator protecting you. So the Holy Christ Self has been doing that for a long time. And we can see in the bodies of people today how many people are yearning for greater strength, greater vigor, greater energy to do what they want to do. And you'll have that greater strength and energy when you obey the laws of God, bank the fires of the heart, and use all the energy at your disposal for good works. When your Holy Christ Self and your I Am Presence can trust you to be consistent and constant, constantly harmonious, unmoved, using the commanding presence of Jesus, peace, be still, and know that the I Am that is God is in me. When you can be counted on not to be moved, you will have access to the Infinite One. It's a great goal to work for, and you can achieve some of it every day. Gain ground and keep it. Never a backward step, right? The earliest records of Jews having mystical experiences date from the 2nd century, the very period when most rabbis were organizing against mysticism, and when the early Christian church was organizing against the Gnostics. Mystics practiced what is called Merkava, or chariot mysticism, a term that comes from Ezekiel's vision of the chariot of God. The prophet Ezekiel is the prototype of the Jewish mystic. Ezekiel 1:4 and 5 records that a whirlwind came out of the north, a great cloud, and a fire enfolding itself, and a brightness was about it, and out of the midst of the fire, as the color of amber, came the likeness of 4 living creatures, which had the likeness of a man. Within the cloud he saw the chariot of God, a glowing object with huge wheels that appeared to be made of topaz, surrounded by 4 four-winged creatures. Above the creatures was a vault of the heavens that gleamed like crystal. Imagine you as Ezekiel feeling the tremendous presence of all 7 levels of the heavens, and being in that state of having God open himself to you. As the appearance of the rainbow that is in the cloud in the day of rain, so was the appearance of the brightness round about. This was the appearance of the likeness of the glory of the Lord. Yud, hey, vav, hey. Blessed be the God of Israel. For centuries, Jewish mystics have tried to reproduce Ezekiel's experience. Gershom Scholem, born 1897, died 1982, was the contemporary authority on Jewish mysticism. He wrote for us, "The Merkava mystics occupy themselves with all the details of the upper world, which extends throughout the 7 palaces in the heaven of Aravot, the uppermost of the 7 heavens, with the angelic hosts which fill the palaces, with the rivers of fire which flow down in front of the chariot, and with the bridges which cross them. But the main purpose of the ascent is to have the vision of the one who sits on the throne, a likeness as the appearance of a man, upon it, above it." The vision of Ezekiel brings to mind the vision of the I Am that I Am, the Son of God, and the individual who ascends the planes of being to attain to those levels. Some Merkava mystics had an out-of-the-body experience as they attempted to replicate the vision and the experience of Ezekiel. Others had the sensation of their whole being going on a journey. Rabbi Akiva, a 2nd century mystic, visualized himself rising through the 7 palaces and 7 thrones until he found himself standing before the throne of God. Hai Gaon, an 11th century mystic, said the experience was an inner journey to the innermost recesses of the heart. Some mystics wrote poems called Merkava hymns, in which they attempted to express the inexpressible experience of seeing God. O wreathed in splendor, crowned with crowns, O chorister of him on high, extol the Lord enthroned in flames, for in the presence of the presence, in the inmost glory of the inmost chambers, you set up your posts. Your names he distinguished from his servant's name. The flame surrounds a leaping fire, around him burning, glowing coals. This is the experience of a Jewish mystic, someone like you, someone like me. The rabbis opposed the practice of Merkava mysticism on the grounds that it was dangerous. Jewish law contained warnings against trying to replicate Ezekiel's experience. The public reading of Ezekiel's vision was banned except on the festival of Shavuot. In fact, Sholem wrote, the rabbis sought to conceal the book of Ezekiel by withdrawing it from general circulation or from the biblical canon. Nevertheless, Jewish mystics practiced Merkava mysticism, usually in secret, for about 1,000 years. Why did the rabbis fear? They feared because the individual would make direct contact with the living God without them. It is the fear of every hierarchy of every world religion. Those hierarchies fear you and me because we dare to come apart and have that direct experience without them. But we invite them all to come into our tent, come into the tabernacle of the Lord and rejoice with us and contact your own living God.